Stain Foundation, a trust organization in Zimbabwe that addresses inequality and discrimination faced by young women and girls, recently hosted a 2-day workshop in Harare aimed at strengthening response mechanisms to sexual harassment in higher and tertiary institutions through intercultural engagement. The event that took place at Cresta Lodge in Masasa brought together various stakeholders operating in Zimbabwe and the US to share notes on best possible ways of combating this rampant cross-cultural problem of sexual abuse at learning institutions. The speakers included representatives from the Ministry of Higher and Tertiary Education, Innovation, Science and Technology Development, Zimbabwe Republic Police Victim Friendly Unit, Zimbabwe Gender Commission, Say What Organization, and the Female Students Network Trust from the US, where organizations such as Safe Horizon, Student Conduct Institute, and Wagner College.
This workshop is a follow-up workshop from other workshops that we have been doing since 2017. In 2017, for instance, we held a workshop, a similar workshop at the United Nations Information Center, where we were unpacking lived livelihoods of female students in higher and tertiary institutions with organizations such as the Female Students Network Trust, the Zimbabwe Republic Police, the UN Women, and the Zimbabwe Women's Lawyers Association. And in this meeting, we realized that the Female Students Network had just conducted a survey where they realized that 90% of students, of female students, had experienced some form of sexual harassment, but it had not been reported. So this raised a lot of questions on the existing internal policies, laws and procedures on curbing sexual harassment in tertiary institutions. And that time, according to Female Students Network, there were only 4 universities with internal policies on sexual harassment, which was something that was very worrisome.
We had a student who took 7 years to graduate. At 3rd year, almost final, she had a sexual harassment issue with the supervisor. She had to report that through the lawyers because we don't have mechanisms. The case took long. And eventually, I think Pauline spoke about it. The lecturer had to resign. That's what these institutions are doing. We don't have anything to. I think they also, influence them. Resign because he had to resign to go to another university. And we followed him up. We said this one should be charged out. Because honestly, ethical, it's not right for a lecturer to ask for favors because they are also playing the parental role when we are at home. We are parents at the same time.
And it was great to learn from the Female Students Network that most institutions now have got an internal sexual harassment policy, but the challenge is that sexual harassment has not yet been criminalized, and various organizations advocating for the criminalization of sexual harassment in higher and tertiary institutions and in general.
Zimbabwe does not have a sexual harassment act. We spoke about this in terms of when we spoke about the different policy and the law. So as a country, we don't have a sexual harassment act, or the legislative provisions that guide us in terms of handling sexual harassment act. There were a lot of gaps that are there. The High Court decision in February 2020 on sexual harassment was made after 10 years since the complaint was lodged. I'm sure I've got law students here. We have law students here who will also be able to even to give us some other insights in terms of these matters.
At innumerable polytechnics and teachers' colleges, they actually don't have sexual harassment policies. And for those who do have, you only find them out when you're being accused of something, or when you would have said, I think I've been sexually harassed, and then they say, but that's not how we define sexual harassment here, and now you end up being implicated. So it would really be helpful that an organization such as Female Students Network would really be enabled to go across campuses to do the work that they're doing. Maybe if they could be supplemented or complemented, it's just a recommendation.
The way the criminal code defines what is a criminal insult, you would see it in campuses, the verbal part that implicates the sexual aspect of an individual in terms of the dignity and privacy. Sepanga chito pavava chitoroti makabatana. You'd see that it's a criminal insult that has got an implication on what? On the sexual well-being of an individual.
The moment you realize you've become a parent, you should know that you have a responsibility ahead of you to make sure that you raise your kids right, make them independent, and make them be aware of people in the society that are after ruining our kids' future through sexual harassment, through rape, etc.
In the first world, we have social workers. They have a very important job of being in schools, teaching and alerting the kids of what's happening. So if they're educated, they can tell the difference between someone who's being playful in the actual act. So you have these things coming out from school. We have the victim-friendly unit. Sometimes their presence in schools is very important as well. Them being educative towards the younger generation so that they know from the calling playfully or when it actually happens, so that in the society when the kids are exposed to such things, they know how serious it is and to differentiate just being playful and when the abuse is actually happening.
It's a subject that we are subjected to maybe when we enroll at college or when we start working. Then it's a conversation that we are introduced to. Then it all becomes something that is new, and in actual fact it's not new. It's something that we have lived with, but it's now being introduced at a late stage in our lives. So what is different with this workshop is that we decided to make it an intercultural engagement workshop where we have brought Dr. Ruta Gordon from Wagner College. She's the Vice President of Enrollment and Campus Life at Wagner College in New York, United States, who is also a Title IX officer, which is Title IX, which is a law, sexual harassment law in the United States, and it is one of the most stringent laws on sexual harassment in the United States.
I have had the opportunity to work with Yali in the Mandela Washington Fellowship for 5 years when fellows came to New York City to study civic engagement at Wagner College. And from that relationship, I was able to meet Charlene Chekenya from the Stand Foundation Trust. And she is a person that she and I have talked to since 2017 about issues of sexual harassment and sexual violence and gender-based violence. And so when one of the opportunities came up for a grant to do a reciprocal exchange and for me to be able to come to Zimbabwe to help look at the work that she's doing, for me to learn more about the work that Zimbabwe is doing, and for us to plan together how to further the work around sexual harassment and sexual violence, I was very humbled and excited to be able to participate. So I'm very glad to be a Mandela Washington reciprocal exchange recipient and participant, and I hope that the workshops that we've been doing for these last 2 days have really looked at involving and convening stakeholders to think about higher and tertiary institutions in Zimbabwe and how they are addressing issues of sexual harassment. And by having all these people come together and learn from one another, we are hoping to put together an action plan that will allow for schools and to be able to address issues around sexual harassment and for students to feel safer around those issues.
And Together, we have been sharing the different cultural contexts of sexual harassment from the Zimbabwean perspective and from the American perspective, as well as exchanging the various ways in which we're curbing sexual harassment and adopting each other's ways of curbing sexual harassment. And this workshop has been quite informative, and we are grateful that the various stakeholders have participated well, and we're hoping for collaboration in the future. Sexual harassment is a big problem because sexual harassment is the root of various forms of gender-based violence, such as sexual assault. It is the root cause. So being the root cause, it's something that is very important and it has to be addressed. I mean, in anything you need to address the roots, right? So sexual harassment is the root cause of various forms of gender-based violence, so it is very important. One of the outcomes of this workshop is to advance socialization of gender-based violence. That is raising awareness, strong awareness among people, both primary and secondary socialization. So we have decided that we will be endeavoring on creating an online platform that we are hoping that will be adopted by various institutions. This online platform is the socialization strategy, which works as a tool of getting students to go through the online training, and it is supposed to be mandatory so that everyone knows sexual harassment, its impacts, the implications of sexual harassment. And this not only is student to lecturer, but it's also student to student, lecturer to lecturer, lecturer to student. So we are hoping on implementing this online systems on sexual harassment.